Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and in the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature of which we are a part, with deep gratitude to all of our ancestors who have brought us to the present place, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. We want to begin our program today with a presentation by Dr. Stephanie Mines about an upcoming course that we're having on Ubiquity University on burnout and buoyancy, and how all of us in a world of stress, in a world of challenge, in a world of runaway climate change can center ourselves, fortify our beings, and increase our capacity and our immune system so that we can withstand diseases of both the body and the spirit, our emotions and the mind. We consider this one of our more important courses that we're offering given world conditions. And Stephanie Mines is a neuroscientist and embryologist who's written extensively on regenerative health. As you may know, Stephanie has convened a number of programs on Humanity Rising on regenerative health, and for the first time is now offering a course on burnout and buoyancy and how we can build our internal resilience. So Stephanie, welcome to Humanity Rising as we begin our program today. And let me just start by asking you to say something about the nature of burnout. And then to describe your course and what people will get out of it if they take the course from Ubiquity University.
Thank you, Jim. And of course, that is a central question because in truth, we are redefining burnout in this time. So burnout traditionally is known as allostatic load is another term for it. And allostatic load refers to the weight on the human nervous system of overwhelming experience. So if you just look at those trees behind you, Jim, those trees have, of course, a mycorrhizal network that is below the surface that's reflected in the wonderful leafy structures behind you. So when adversity occurs in the environment, for the trees, it creates a weight, a burden that weighs down the natural innate buoyancy of that mycorrhizal network. The exact same thing is true of the human nervous system and the human immune system. So my research as an embryologist has absolutely clarified and proven that buoyancy is innate in the human structure, but the nature of allostatic load has been so great and is greater and greater every day, virtually every hour, that we have to redefine how we go from allostatic load, which is burnout, to allostasis, which is equilibrium, but I actually am inviting people to go beyond equilibrium to buoyancy. So there will be a summit in September, right after Labor Day, that will be a prelude to the course on Ubiquity and a prelude to an entire opportunity to become a regenerative health practitioner. And we have a special guest, Jim, at the summit. And this special guest is regal, absolutely regal. Her name is Chong Mai, and she is actually, Jim, your grandmother and your great-grandmother. And she is also the great-grandmother of this gorgeous woman who always accompanies me. Her name is Tara, and she's also my great-grandmother. And she is going to be with us in the summit and in the regenerative health program. Chong Mai is the regenerating, penetrating sea of blood, the great mother. And the good news is that the Great Mother lives inside us, Jim. The Great Mother is not just a theory that comes from Eastern wisdom. The Great Mother is living, vital buoyancy that we bring with us upon conception. So in the summit, this is going to be extraordinary. You're going to love it. Everyone is going to be met personally by Chiang Mai, the Great Mother, the penetrating vessel, the sea of blood. I will take the leap through cyberspace to each participant individually and experientially deliver to you how you can activate Chiang Mai in your body. So the summit, deconstructing burnout and redefining burnout, and not at all being stuck in the qualities of burnout, quite the opposite, bouncing out of the challenge that faces us now into buoyancy to meet the central health challenge of these times. So deconstructing burnout is the summit in September, and from burnout to buoyancy is the program in October, Ubiquity University. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And just as a reminder, everyone, this is our second to the last day before we take a break for August. And during August, we're all going to be making pilgrimage. Many of us, 90 of us actually, are going to be making pilgrimage to Chartres in France, including Stephanie, who will be coming. And then we'll reconvene on the 6th of September. And between the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th of September, Stephanie will inaugurate our fall program with a whole series of sessions, 4 sessions on regenerative health generally, but really emphasizing how we move from burnout to buoyancy and resilience in our beings, both in the invisible and the visible aspects of who we are. So Stephanie, thank you so much. Deeply appreciate everything you've done to help humanity to rise. And I would say, everyone, that given the escalating turbulence and chaos in our world, I don't know of anything more important than what we all need to do to ensure that our interior equilibrium, our interior capacity for fortitude is healthy, is vital, and is abundant. And I don't know of anybody who knows more about how to do this than Stephanie Mines. So Stephanie, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the 6th of September.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye-bye. Stephanie is a marvelous woman. I've gotten to know her over the last year or two that we've been doing Humanity Rising, and she is passionate about regenerative health. And as an embryologist and as a neuroscientist, she knows both the science, but she's also connected with the ancient wisdom of the goddesses and the field spirits and the ways that we can naturally increase our regeneration and our vitality. You know, we're in a world where everything's about a vaccine and take a pill for this, and the big pharma's got a solution for that. And the side effects, well, you just endure the side effects. But what Stephanie focuses on, which is so important, is how do we rejuvenate our health naturally so that we're strengthening ourselves from the inside out. And that's the strongest immunization that we can develop. And it's something that we emphasize here on Humanity Rising. So it's an important aspect of what we all need to take into consideration during this moment in history. I would like to now turn to our major program for today, and that is to deal with the issue which is related to what Stephanie just said. You know, the world is getting crazier and crazier. False news is everywhere. The ideologies of the 20th century have collapsed. We're in the presence of rapacious capitalism that is ripping the world apart, both in terms of community and in terms of the ecology. Humanity is now considered scientifically an endangered species, along with 1 million other species, as the world spins out of control. The spiritual health of humanity has been assaulted. The prevailing religious institutions that have endured, in some cases, for thousands of years are shaking and are crumbling before our very eyes. In Europe, less than 2% of the population ever go into a church. In the United States, considered one of the most religious countries in the world, the percentage of people considering themselves religious is falling year by year. And what is emerging in its place is a deep spirituality, but without religious ideology. And that's a very important transposition of values, unprecedented in history, of where more and more people are considering themselves not religious, but deeply spiritual. So today we want to turn to a Dutchman and draw from the wisdom of Europe. And we're very pleased to invite Eric van Prague to the program. He's been attending Humanity Rising sessions from the beginning on and off. He's a very deeply spiritual being. He's a Freemason. He's going to tell us a little bit about Freemasonry, one of the great mystical strands, I would say, of Western spirituality. And we'll get into the history of Freemasonry in the course of our program. He is a psychotherapist practicing for many, many years. He's also a coach and has written some 14 books, 3 or 4 of which have been translated into English, and has really deeply pondered how, in a time of radical secularism, a time of radical deconstruction of almost everything we thought was true coming into the 20th and 21st centuries, how in the midst of that, we as individuals, but also as communities, can maintain our spiritual health and well-being. Because without our spiritual health and well-being, nothing else matters. Literally. It is essential for our authenticity to be able to glean as best we can the pearls of wisdom of the Spirit. So Eric, welcome to Humanity Rising. Please turn on your video and take yourself off mute. And we want to welcome you to our program. And why don't we begin, Eric, by just having you tell your story of how you, as a young man, how you began to articulate your spirituality. And I think people would be very interested in your pathway. How did you become a Freemason? And then we'll take the dialogue from there. But welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you a lot. How I became Freemason. Actually, the story begins way before I became a Freemason. Already in my teenage time, I decided came from somewhere inside the idea that I wanted to grow to my own level of excellency in a way. I wasn't motivated to be very famous or to be very rich, but I wanted to grow to my own level of excellency. That was what I wanted to do. And
Eric,
so, yeah.
let me just pause here. We have a number of people in our chat that want to have this moment of heart coherence that I normally do as I open up our programs.
Okay, I was wondering why you didn't do that. Go ahead, and I'll wait.
That was
and
my
I start
mistake,
anew.
everyone.
Do it. I
apologize.
was wondering why you didn't do that.
Yeah. So let's just take
Okay,
a moment.
do that. Do your normal thing.
Yeah, let's just take a moment, everyone. I apologize for getting ahead of myself this morning. I was enthralled by what Stephanie was saying, and then eager to get to Eric. It's always important.
But those 5 minutes we really need.
It's always important, thank you, that we just take a pause in all the tumult of our world and center ourselves in our bodies, in the awareness that our bodies are nature. And our bodies are our temples of the Holy Ghost, the temples of our capacity to regenerate. And let us, in our bodies, take a few deep breaths, and let us close our eyes if we can and center ourselves in our hearts. Our hearts carry our basic energetic connection with being. And for the next 90 seconds or so, let us love one another. Let us commune with nature. Let us feel our inner strength. Let us breathe together as one. Thank you, everyone. I always feel so much better after this heart coherence centering. So I appreciate you calling it to my attention. Sometimes all of us get too far front of center as we rush through life, and I did that today. And so I appreciate people pausing, centering, and remembering who we most essentially are. So in that spirit, Eric, I want to welcome you again to Humanity Rising. Eric is a very old friend of mine. So Eric, just resume what you were saying. Just tell us a little bit more about your youth and your upbringing and the pathway, your spiritual pathway that led you to Freemasonry.
Actually, I think, and I keep it short because already we lost some time, but I think an important, I studied psychology and planned change and worked at university for a while, researching actually scientific methodology and giving teaching. But then I became a psychotherapist for quite a few years, and then I wanted to work in the industrial world, in the corporate world. And at 1972, the Club of Rome, I think.
Yeah, 1972.
Yeah, it was 1972, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that for me was I was already worried about the climate situation and the nature degrading, but at that time that was really a wake-up call. And they said in those report, they said, we still can change the situation for better if we just now start to really work at more responsible behavior toward nature and the climate and so on and so forth, then we still can make it. And then my first thought was, but that is not going to happen. And unfortunately, I was right. We didn't really respond to this emergency call, I would call it. And then I decided in my work as an organizational consultant, I did two things, actually. I worked on my own spiritual development. I went to Buddhist retreats. I did all kinds of psychological training. I joined the church at a certain moment. I was 40, and I left the church at 50. So that was also an interesting movement. And because I left the church, actually because I'll come to that in a moment in my presentation, I didn't find there what I needed. And what I needed was just a group of people who together worked on their own spiritual development. I actually gave myself groups about personal development and spiritual development, but I also needed a group where I could be a participant and not a leader. So in 1960, I became a Freemason, and that I'm still. That's a short story. So I want to leave it at this. Maybe later on we come on some details.
What was it, Eric, out of all the possibilities, what drew you to the Freemasonry?
Two things, actually, I think. One thing is that it was at that moment the most, I think even the only alive Western spiritual tradition. I studied Buddhism, I studied Taoism, but that was all Eastern, and I learned a lot, and it helped me also to develop, but it didn't completely, it didn't come completely, how could I say it? I think it was a cultural difference. Those was the East, and I'm a Western, I'm a European. So, and Freemasonry is a real Western spiritual tradition based in old Western and even also Eastern, Egyptian, Greek, but also Middle Ages and so on. It's a European tradition, actually, and later on, of course, an American tradition. And that's one reason. And the other reason was that Freemasonry doesn't have a strict ideology or a strict dogmatism about spirituality. There are some principles about how to work and how to do the rituals, but those are tools. They are not like in the Christian church, for instance. There is a theory, a theology about how the world is, how God is, and so on and so on. But in Freemasonry, you have to really find out for yourself. I'll come to that too in my presentation, and that was very attractive. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And why don't you now just launch into your presentation?
Okay.
And then we'll have a dialogue on the other side.
Okay, good. As you said in your introduction, more and more people leave the church and became without any religion. And in the Netherlands, about half of the population are now non-believers. There's also a development that the social gap between the believers, the traditional, orthodox, and liberal believers, and the secular is widening. It is as if there are two groups in the country who hardly have any contact about their spirituality. And maybe it's the same in the United States. I'm not sure how the situation is there, but you can fill that in for yourself, I think. What do I think about this personally? In a way, I'm glad with the decline of the traditional religions. That also implies the decline of dogmatism. Although I must say there are quite a few atheists or secular people who are very dogmatic as well, because they know for sure that God doesn't exist and they are very dogmatic about it. And that is very strange because you never can prove, of course, that something or someone doesn't exist. So that's a side story. But dogmatism is really a very harmful thing in the society. We know that. It restricts free thinking. It makes an open exchange about spirituality very difficult. It leads to slander. It leads to a feeling of superiority. I know how it is, and I'm superior. That's also a result of dogmatism. And dogmatic religions have produced terrible things. Discrimination, religious wars, slander, and I only can refer to the Supreme Court ruling in the United States about abortion to show how harmful actually dogmatism can be. So on the one hand, I was very glad that dogmatism just disappeared, or now didn't disappear. It is still half of the population, but anyway. On the other hand, we need, as you said already in your introduction, we need some basis in life, some belief, some faith, I would call it. We need a basis from where we can find the courage in these disastrous times, because it is very, it's religion, or not religion, but spirituality may strengthen our resilience, and it gives meaning to our existence. Spirituality can provide something to hold on to. Friedrich Nietzsche said, the famous statement, God is dead, but he also said, we can't handle this knowledge, God is dead. We are not up to it. And that, I think, is true. The lack of faith makes us also, as you already said in your introduction, Jim, makes us also susceptible to fake news and to tyrannical leaders who promise quick fixes for the problems in society. So actually, the fall of the religions leaves a kind of gap, a kind of emptiness. So what we need is a whole new kind of faith in order to arrive at a vibrant, dynamic faith, an open mind, and we have to let go of the old learned convictions. I want to say in this connection that there is a big difference between religion and conviction. Many people who are religious or are a member of a religion, in fact, aren't very spiritual, but they have a conviction. that you cannot convince them, or you can't even debate or talk with them or discuss with them. By the way, I realized that I'm a Dutchman and my English is not that good, so I apologize for that, but I think hope you can follow me. So the question that arises, how can we develop that new faith? And there Freemasonry comes in. The Freemasons have a basic principle. I wouldn't call that a dogma, but a basic principle, and it is called the ground architect of the universe. And from outside Freemasonry, people think, well, that's just another name for God. But that is not true. Because we get, as a Freemason, we get the assignment to find out for ourselves what this principle, ground architect of the universe, what that for us personally means, or what that is. Freemasonry differs in that sense from traditional religions. They all fill in or fill out some knowledge about God, who God is and what he wants and so on and so forth, and what he asks from us. But that's not true as the ground architect of the universe. It is asked from us Freemasons to find out what this basic principle that is on the basis of our development as a Freemason, but also as a person, of course, what or who he is. Now, many people who do not believe in God say there must be something when they look at the cosmos. It must be something, some origin, some creation, something, but we call it something. But actually, they cannot specify for themselves what that something is, and they don't, and make no effort actually to find out what that something is. So there is this kind of somethingism, and that actually blocks spiritual development, and it is also unnecessary. It is, I think, just stopping at the idea there must be something is a kind of spiritual laziness. And when we do the effort, when we make the effort, that we can say quite a bit about this something and bring it more, make it more concrete for ourselves and bring it closer to ourselves. And actually that something then becomes indeed a basis for faith. When we talk about the Creator, we use all kinds of names for it. Essence, intelligence, God, Allah, Brahma, presence, source or primal source, eternal, Jehovah, Great Spirit, ground architect, etc., etc., you name it. All these names have its drawbacks, because with each of these words that bring with them certain images and meanings that actually detract from the essence and totality of the something. That is, for instance, why the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, prescribes that we should not name or depict Yahweh. And also within Freemasonry, we assume that the word, the name, has been lost. And each Mason should seek for it for himself. But then is the question, how then can we refer to that something, or God, if you like? I've chosen to use the term origin, but there is, of course, a kind of idea behind that. And the idea is that the universe we are living in is being created. It is not coming from nothing. it is for us very difficult to think of something that comes out of nothing. So most of us naturally think that the universe is created. And I have chosen the term origin for that creative force. It indicates a beginning, and it indicates something to which nothing precedes. So origin is opposed to the word source, what is also used very often for the something. Because source is also the source of something. Source of insight, source of oil, source of gas or water or whatever. So there is always something that precedes the source. But the origin is really the beginning. There cannot be anything before the origin, because then the origin wouldn't be the origin, but then the thing that would be there before the origin would be the origin, if you can follow me. So I use the word origin, and I talk about the origin as in the male sense, as a he, because in Dutch the word origin has the male gender. Now, if we presume that there is an origin of everything, then a few interesting questions arise. One question is, what are the characteristics of that origin? And another question is, how can we connect with that origin? Because those things will help us in the end to find our faith in which the origin is a basis. Let me ask with the first question about the characteristic of that origin. George, can you give that list of characteristics of origin and place that in the screen? Is that possible? Because we had some problems in the beginning, you remember? I'll get now a completely different screen.
What do you see? Oops, wait, one second.
Okay, now let me go on anyway. Yeah, that's what I mean.
You go.
Thank you very much, George. This is a list of characteristics of the origin. So the origin, and I will elaborate on all those points, all those items. So the origin is eternal, it's timeless. It is an all-encompassing whole. The origin is perfect. It is the creator of several universes. It has no fixed form of appearance, but it has the possibility to assume all imaginable and unimaginable forms, and it is noble. So I will say something about all of these items. In the first place, the origin is eternal. Now, that is a very strange concept if you come to think about it. It means that it will exist forever, an infinitely long time. And that is something we more or less can imagine. But it also means that it has been there forever. The origin is something that existed always, and that is something that we hardly can conceive of. We can hardly understand that. In our thinking, everything that exists or has existed or is going to exist has a cause. But the origin has no cause. It has been there always. And that is a very strange and mysterious idea. If we really let that if we get impressed by that, something that exists always, then we really connect with the mystery. It's very strange. The origin is, as they say in the classical language, a causa sui, or a causa prima. It is a cause of itself. So these are, like the other characters, these are things to contemplate about, because that brings us more closer to the origins. Now, the second thing is that the origin is all-compassing. It is an all-encompassing whole. So it's not exclusively physical or spiritual, male or female or neuter, not personal nor impersonal, nor good nor bad, and so on. It is all that at once. The reason that is so is because the origin created everything. And when we think about creating, when we create something, before it materializes in some form, we have a thought, an idea, an image about what it is we want to create, consciously or unconsciously. And that's the same with the creation process of the universe. The origin must have a kind of concept, idea, image, whatever it is, about what it is that it is going to create. And that the consequence of that is, and it's of course creating quite a lot. The universe has endless many forms, and it's very rich and even inconceivable big, and so on and so forth. But all what the origin creates or is going to create in the future must already be present in the origin. It's very interesting. If you think about the creation of the universe, it started with the Big Bang. And the Big Bang didn't originate from a singularity, that is a point with an infinitely small volume and an infinitely large density, but it developed from a point that came very close to that singularity. So it was very small, very tiny, but everything that is created in the universe was already present in that very small point from where the Big Bang originated. And that is true for the origin as a whole. Everything that is created is already present in non-material form in the origin. It's all encompassing. That means also that all the elements of the origin, dus all the elements in the universe, are connected with each other. Because if they were not connected with each other, then a thing that was not connected could function without, how could I say it? It could function independently of all the other things, and then the origin would not be the origin of that element anymore. So, like with the characteristic of eternity, is also this characteristic a logical characteristic of the origin. It cannot be otherwise than everything that exists was already in in concept present in the origin, and all the things are connected. This is also something to contemplate about, because it has very important implications about how we want to be in the world. The origin is also perfect, which I mean by perfect. Perfect actually is a word that has two meanings. It can mean it is nothing can be better, but I mean something different. Perfect for me is that it is complete. Everything that has been created and will be created is present in the origin. So it is connected with the characteristic before this. The other three characteristics that are on the list are not that logically and rational defendable as the first three, more ideas. The question arises, does the origin create only one universe, or does it create more universes? In the majority of cosmologists and physicists assume the existence of innumerable universes, natural hours. And there are also cosmologists who assume that there are only a few universes. And there are also cosmologists who say there is only one. Anyway, I personally think that the origin creates indeed more universes than one. Another characteristic of the origin is that it can manifest itself in material and immaterial form in all kinds of forms. All natural religions and almost all religious movements and world religions assume that there is an invisible, transcendental world in which all kinds of beings reside: angels, ancestors, devas, demons, spirits, whatever you can think of. Its existence has been postulated somewhere and their appearance has been reported. Those are also manifestations of the origin, like the physical world is a manifestation of the origin. And then the origin is knowable. We can know the origin, but we cannot understand it. But people get confused about it because the origin is so mysterious and so so big, so mysterious. I can't find another word now. So it's so mysterious and so big and unimaginable in a way that we cannot understand it, but we can know the origin. Like actually we can know each other without completely understanding the other person. Same as the origin. It's good to realize it. I come now to the second, and George, maybe you can put the second document in. Yes, how to connect with it. That's the second question was, how can we connect with the origin? There are several ways, but I'll mention a few. The first way that how we connect with origin is by studying the cosmic laws. It's actually the building plan of the origin. There are two types of cosmic laws, by the way, the physical laws and the mystical laws. The physical laws we all know, these laws of gravity, the law of the electricity, all the physical laws we know of. I don't have to dwell on that. But there are also mystical laws, like the law of karma, the law of synchronicity, the law of so above, so below, all these kind of laws. The physical laws can be studied by science. The mystical laws can just be experienced and observed, but not studied in a scientific way. And that's why some people don't believe in the mystical laws, but they are very real and very present. But anyway, just diving into the laws, let them see how beautiful, actually, the cosmos, the universe is designed, creates feelings of awe and wonder and humility also. And that is one way to connect with the origin. But there's a more direct way, and that is called divine indwelling. In many traditions and religions, it is stated that the origin is represented in us personally. It is an element in our consciousness. It is sometimes referred to as God or Holy Spirit or the eternal or the light. It is very difficult to understand it, that something that is so all-encompassing and so mysterious and infinite and eternal as the origin, how can that be personally present in us? Yes, it seems to be so. I call this inner presence sometimes my guide, sometimes my inner spirit. It is that what we always, sometimes it shows itself as intuition, whatever. It is very interesting to know that the origin is really in us as an entity. The Urantia book, that's one of the spiritual books that inspires me, calls it the thought adjuster. It is, the origin is, reveals itself then as sometimes as a guide, as an insight that comes from somewhere deep inside that you don't know the source of that insight of the advice, but sometimes you know, this is what I have to do, this is what I should do, this is, sometimes it is connected to conscience, but anyway, there is a thought adjuster in us that is the representation of the origin in our personality. A third way to connect with the origin is through the stories of the incarnation of the origin. We know about two descriptions of the manifestation of the origin on earth in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Bible. The Bhagavad Gita is Krishna, and in the Bible it is Jesus, as we all know. And they both, Krishna, he himself says, I am the origin of everything. Jesus doesn't say that in that way, but he says very often time, I am. And that, of course, is the answer that God himself gave to Moses in Exodus, when Moses asked him, who can I say that you are? And then God said, I am who I am, or I am who I become. So I am basically is also a statement of I am the origin. So those two cases are said to be manifestations of the origin. I realized that I forgot something to say when I was talking about the all-encompassing aspect of the origin. The origin is also sometimes considered as a trinity, like Buddha, Vishnu, Shiva, or or Osiris, Isis, Horus, but also Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But basically, those three elements of the origin are all a pars pro toto. They all stand for the whole origin because every element in the origin is connected with every other element, as I said before. So, even with the Trinity, the whole discussion about if Jesus is a son of God or just a person or both is actually irrelevant. If Jesus came on earth and if the scriptures give some truth about what he's saying and doing, then we must say, yeah, Jesus was a manifestation of the origin on earth. But Jesus doesn't live anymore, so the connection with Jesus and Krishna is not as direct as the connection with the origin through the divine indwelling. Okay, there is much more to say about the origin, but actually I want first ask you, Jim, are there any questions you, well, let me first conclude what we already found. Can you, George, can you give the third thing? Yes, the first document. Yeah. So as a conclusion, I'd like to say that for me, it's highly probable that the origin really exists because our thinking is constructed such that we think that everything has a cause except the first cause. So the universe has a cause, and if it has a cause, the origin exists. If you say the universe just is created, or not is created, but is coming into existence from nothing, then you can be indeed then you can indeed go through life without the idea of an origin. But that is not how my thinking is constructed. It is possible to discover and describe the most essential characteristics of the origin. That was what I said. And it is possible to get closer to the origin both through the world around us and through our inner world, and thus also through the inner world of another person, as Levinas said. So, if we take the time to contemplate about all the things that I just presented, if we go to contemplate about this, or meditate about this, or talk with other people about this, like we could do within the lodge in Freemasonry, but you can do it with everyone, then I cannot imagine that at a certain moment you feel the mystery of the universe and the mystery of the origin and the mystery that underlies everything and leads to feelings of awe. And that, I think, is a basis for the dynamic phase that we so desperately need in the world. And the dynamic phase is a faith that is open to other viewpoints. It is not dogmatic. It is not an idea. It is not a construct. It is not an ideology. It is not a dogma. It is a kind of feeling that maybe I could best describe as trust in life itself. There is some basic level of trust underneath everything. There is not so much reason for trust in this world right today. We are in a very big danger, but therefore we need this kind of basic trust that comes from contemplating the origin. But of course, you can all see it also differently. Jim, in this stadium. Do you have questions? Do you want me to elaborate on something? Or is there something in the chat that needs to be answered?
Well, there's been a very active dialogue in the chat about origin and nothingness and everything, and how we mere humans with our finite minds can understand, the totality of being. Stan made the comment, that we tend to think of the universe coming out of nothing, but it's probably more accurate to say that the universe came out of everything. And, Nassim Haramein, the great physicist, it takes that position, that matter and the visible manifest world emanates out of space, and it's space that's eternal. Everything in space, in the invisible realm, is full of these little Planck entities, as he calls them, that are vibrating at very, very unbelievably fast frequencies that go in and out of the visible and invisible worlds. And that's what produces us. And so we've been having a dialogue as you've been going along. And so thank you for being so provocative, Eric. One question that someone asked is around what you're presenting, your own personal point of view, or is this the essential message of Freemasonry?
No, this is my own personal view, but it is based on, it's inspired, let me say it that way, by lots of spiritual traditions, including Freemasonry. But this is not the idea of Freemasonry. But it is an example of how, from contemplating, meditating, doing our rituals around the grand architect of the universe, how that inspires me, but inspires all Freemasons to develop, over many of them, I must say, to think about what or who this grand architect of the universe is. But I also want to respond to the physicists you talked about. It still poses the question, where does reality that he describes, that precedes our universe as we know it, where that is coming from? There is, and of course, also the origin in the end leaves us with a question. And another thing that I want to say is, it is not possible to understand the origin. There's quite a bit that we can't understand. There are also things in quantum physics that we cannot understand, but we can be informed about it. That's the same as the origin. We can know about it, we can think about it, we can talk about it, we can come closer to it. But in the end, we don't understand. It is too mysterious. But we can come close. We can come closer to the mystery. And that feeling of mystery.
Yeah.
And that feeling of mystery creates faith. In my experience, but this is not just my experience, I have seen that by other people as well.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to Aristotle. I mean, Aristotle said, that you just have to start with what he calls the first cause.
Yeah,
you can't get behind it. You can't explain it, but you have to start with it. There's no other way to begin any kind of philosophical speculation. You just have to start.
He used the term causos, in Greek, of course, but I don't know the Greek term, but it was translated in Latin by causa sui, its own cause.
Yeah.
It's the origin is its own cause. But and you could say now, well, then of course the question arises, what was the, but the interesting thing is what I said, is that the origin has been there always. And that is in itself something we can't, it's very difficult to imagine that something has been there always. In a way, in that sense, I'm not different from the physicist you mentioned. He always says something that has been there always. I think, but I don't know. That's how I picked it up. But anyway.
Well, Carol Sue Engelman is just putting something in that would be worth your comment. She's saying that Stephen Hawking's Big Bang Theory was just a theory, and Stephen felt it wasn't true at the end of his life. If you look at the torus energy field, it is constantly having babies, thus growing and populating the cosmos into universes, planets, people, etc. So what is the first birth of the torus energy field? That would get back to your notion of the first cause is that which creates itself. That's the best I think humans can do.
If it's coming from the torus or coming from the singularity Big Bang. By the way, I know that Stephen said it. I'm not knowing exactly. I didn't study it myself, what Stephen said, but I read about it, so I know a little bit of this. But I think it doesn't matter how you describe. I want to say, first to say something else. There are quite a few physicists who said that Stephen Hawking at that stage lost his clarity, lost his way in a way. There are quite a few physicists who don't think he was right, but maybe he was right. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. There is a beginning of the reality as we know it. If it is the Big Bang or is it the theory of Stephen Hawking, that doesn't matter. There is a beginning. But the question is, what was the cause of the beginning? And that I call the origin. That question stays true in the theory of Stephen. There is a beginning, also in his case. There is a beginning. But then is the question, what is the cause of the beginning? And that is the causa sui.
Yeah.
And you could always ask yourself, why is it important to think about it, to meditate about it, to pay attention to what is before the beginning? Well, in my, maybe I didn't make that clear. Actually, I started, well, in the beginning, we talked about my spiritual development. The beginning of that is going inside, researching what's going inside of you, how things developing inside myself, and listening to teachers and reading books and so on and so forth, which is all connected to the inside. But at a certain moment, my attention turned to the outside, the universe. And then the things happened that I talked about. I saw the laws. I saw the nature, being in nature, like you always say, is the beginning of human rising, the spirit of the trees. We can connect to that. We can connect to nature. We can, and then I realized that the universe is as mysterious as our inner world. And I can say more about it. I believe in the Hamitic statement, so above, so below. So the inner world is a kind of, how do you say that? I have some problem with the English, but it is a kind of same construction like the outer world. Also, our body has millions of elements, and they are all connected, and that is a mystery. But you can have the same mystery when you go to look at the universe. And then the question arises, where does the universe and where does my body come from? And then, so that led me to the origin and going to thinking about origin. And the other thing, of course, is that I'm very worried about the fact that there is an enormous lack of spirituality amongst our leaders. I think that one of the reasons why both our leaders, but also many of the voters, have a kind of are either dogmatist or have an inner emptiness, and that makes them very susceptible to fake news, to leaders who, because they are deep down inside, they feel empty, they feel hopeless, they feel anxious, all that kind of thing. And then, of course, that makes you susceptible to fake news, to leaders who promise quick fixes and so on. That's why I think it's so important that we find ways to develop spirituality in ourselves that are not connected to the traditional ideas of God. It's, by the way, an idea that's also promoted by Caroline Myss. She also said we need a new spirituality.
Sure.
Not connected to the old religions.
Now, Eric, let me bring in a question from Ginger Schaefer. She's asking again about Freemasonry, since that was what we is the context here. She's asking, which branch of Freemasonry do you belong to? And are women allowed? And which scriptures do you open your meetings with? And does your branch recognize the Regius manuscript and the Holy Church?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Freemasonry, who is the oldest one, which is the general male Freemasonry in the world. As a woman, there are now also female orders, and there are also mixed orders. So you can just choose as a person if you want to join a mixed order or a female order or a male order. So, but I chose at the time just to be in a male order, just for personal reasons. I like that.
So Freemasonry gives you your choice. You can be either male or female or mixed.
Yeah.
But the theology and
it's basically for the three the same. But
it's basically the same.
Basically the same. There are differences with the different orders. There is one big difference within Freemasonry, and that is that there are orders who don't pay much attention to that grand architect of the universe. They are more or less agnostic or atheistic. And there is another big part of Freemasonry, but certainly in America, but also in Europe, who still work with the principle of the grand architect of the universe. Another question was, we in our lodge and in most of our lodges in the order I'm a member of, we open the lodge still with the Bible, not because we believe in everything that is written there, but but it is a book that has a lot of wisdom, a lot of spiritual or divine inspiration, but it is also written by people, and so it is also, how could I say, a little bit polluted, I could say, by all ideas of human ideas in it. So we certainly don't believe everything that in the Bibles that is true, but we still feel inspired by the Bible and take. But you can use, if you want to be Freemason, you may use another holy book as your start of Freemasonry, like the Quran or whatever. That is allowed
And
now.
when did another question that's come up from Linda White is, when did the Freemasons allow women in, and the establishment of both women orders and mixed orders? Is that recent, or is that centuries
relatively
old?
recent compared with the history of Freemasonry? I think it happened when the first female emancipation wave started. So it was the beginning of last century. So in the beginning
of the 20th century.
Yes,
so about 100
right.
years.
Yeah, that's right.
Gotcha. Well, Eric, as we come to the beginning of our close, I'd like to focus our attention on a comment that you made about our leaders. You know, as we look at the complete lack of leadership almost anywhere in the world, of any kind of elegance or vision or caring, it's a deeply puzzling and potentially catastrophic state of affairs, that we don't seem to be able to raise up leaders that can truly lead humanity. And we find ourselves in a situation that's been noted many, many times on Humanity Rising, where we, the people, have to come to terms with the stark reality that our leaders are not going to lead on climate change, on virtually any other issue of deep global concern. So within that context, given the spirituality that you've derived for yourself, what would you say to Humanity Rising as a community here, as to the kind of spirituality that you believe we need to inculcate in ourselves, to give ourselves individually and collectively the capacity to do what must be done, given the fact that our national leaders seem to be resolved not to do it?
Yeah, this is
because normally when situations like this occur, you have revolutions where people overthrow the governments because of their complete corruption, ineptitude, and lack of vision. Now we're in a situation where revolutionary activity may be as dangerous as the problem we're seeking to solve. So how do you square that circle, as it were?
Okay.
Where does where is the locus of spirituality in this present predicament?
So you are ending with the most difficult question that I could imagine. I work on leadership already my whole life. My first major book was called Spiritual Leadership, and that was not about leadership in spiritual settings, but it was about leadership in the managerial world. It's the only book that sold well, but it didn't have much effect. But anyway, George Appanelli said something in the Democracy series for a few weeks ago. He said something repeatedly, something very important. He said, we, the people, should go on the streets and stay there until something is really changing. But the problem is that what happens, sometimes we go on the streets, like with George Floyd or with Black Lives Matter and so on. But then as soon as, then we also disappear. So there is some idea of we should do something, and then, but we don't stay there. And the reason we don't stay there is because it seems to be so that as humanity, we need indeed a crystallization point, a leader, to even with mass demonstrations, to get some results. The Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, the Mandelas, the Tutus, those people. And those people are very, very rare. So even a person like, for instance, Greta Thunberg, she is absolutely, in a way, a leader. But she is also missing something, namely, she can't translate her wonderful ideas, her passion, her very wonderful intentions. She can't translate that in a structure that really breaks into this very bad situation. I think a leader needs a few things. I think in the first place, a leader needs to know himself and take time to develop himself. So he has to watch himself, to look to himself, to investigate himself, like also then that lead to investing the universe. But anyway, you start with yourself. You have to know yourself first. Self-knowledge is importantly important. For instance, one leader that I, to a certain extent, admired was President John Kennedy. And why I admire him was that he had this wonderful speech at the Berlin Wall. And he said, I'm a believer. Yeah, that. And in the book of Schlesinger about Kennedy, it is said that he came to his hotel room after that and thought, Jesus Christ, what have I done? What is different between what I did and what Hitler did? Bringing a mob to a kind of enthusiasm. And then they can go everywhere and everything. So that kind of self-reflection makes a man great, or a woman, by the way. So that's self-reflection, first thing. Second thing is courage. I think you have nowadays, you yourself said something about that a few, in the democracy series, I think, something about people who came forward. Well, in a way, people who indeed in Congress now say the truth, really the truth. Even Republicans who every now and then say the truth. That asks for courage. That is, you have to be very courageous to stand up. I think in a way, something that Mike Pence did on the 6th of January, I think, was courageous.
Yeah.
That is he was a real fan of Donald Trump, and it still is, I think. But at that moment, he took a stand. We are going to decide the elections according to the rules. I think that's courage. You need to have humility as a leader. And that is very problematic, because for most positions, humility doesn't help to come forward. But I think on the deeper level, it does. Modesty, humility, it makes. Tutu is a wonderful example. He is that is a man who is modest, he has humility, and still radiates an enormous strength. Interesting combination. You need to be honest, very honest with yourself, with what's going on. You shouldn't say about climate change, well, we are going to make it. We don't know. We don't simply know. We are in danger. You have to say that, but then the next thing comes, you also need to have a commitment to the future, together with the honesty.
Yeah, very important.
Because otherwise, that complicated balance between stating the truth, even being in a way an alarmist, but at the same time say, we don't give up. We don't give up. We don't give up. Now, the question you ask, so now I describe leadership, but the question is, of course, why is it that those people don't come forward? Many people have a few of these things, but not many people have all 4 or 5 of these things. That is the problem. I think it starts with self-investigation. I think that is important. Just know who I am and make a difference between what I call I consciousness and self-consciousness, which is the self is a much deeper level than the I awareness. And that is, but that is something I can say also after years of self-investigation. I couldn't say that 30 years ago.
Well, that's a beautiful summary, Eric. Know thyself. Live
and that
courageously.
That is the first principle of Freemasonry. Know thyself. That's the first principle.
Yeah.
As an apprentice, when you come in, it's the first thing you hear. Know yourself. It's on not only above the portal of Delphi, it's also above the portal of Heavenly Lodge. Know yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's the bottom line.
Bottom
listen,
line.
Eric, thank you so much. I really appreciate your philosophical speculations today and your articulation of a coherent worldview that has come out of decades of deep reflection, informed by Freemasonry, but not limited by Freemasonry.
No, that's true. That's very true.
So I think you exemplify the kind of self-awareness, the kind of courage, the kind of honesty, and the kind of deep optimism about the future that characterizes the leadership that all of us, whoever we are, should embody. Those are 4 cardinal virtues that you're leaving with us today. So I want to thank you for it. And that brings us to a close, everyone. Those of you who can, please join our after session chat. And just as a reminder, tomorrow will be our final day before we break for the month of August and then resume on September 6th with Regenerative Health with Stephanie Mines. So tomorrow is our grand finale for this opening term of Humanity Rising in 2022.
I'd like to say one thing more.
Sure.
I participated in the first series in Chartres. That I forgot to say when I talked about my personal development, but that was also a very important moment. And I want you to thank you for that you set it up.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we've done 3 cycles, everyone, of the 7 liberal arts.
And I did the first one.
And Eric was there for the first cycle and contributed very importantly, like he's done today. And that established our familiarity and friendship with one another. And we're going to be going back in a few weeks between the 13th and the 19th of August for the 3rd of the liberal arts and our 3rd cycle on rhetorica, which is under the aegis of the planet Venus.
That's how it starts every time. Yeah.
And so thank you for that. And we got 90 people coming, Eric. It's going to be quite a strong
that's quite
group.
a number.
Yeah. So thank you so much, my friend. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you in the after chat. And then we'll see you again here tomorrow for our final session before we break for the month of August. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.